Today, I want to talk about how Russia kept blabbering about using nukes during the Ukraine war. You know, all that talk about tossing gas canisters at the enemy, but why haven't they actually done it yet? There are like 4 reasons, and the last one is the most basic and core of them all. First off, there's Elon Musk's Starlink tech. They've launched like 6,785 low-orbit satellites that pretty much cover every nook and cranny on Earth. Over on the Russian-European battlefield, Starlink's been a huge help for Ukraine's aerial recon and target spotting. It gives them real-time intel so they can quickly and accurately zero in on Russian targets. And get this, it's also keeping an eye on every single Russian nuclear silo. So if even one of them shows a hint of movement, the US and NATO are going to jump in immediately and strike back, turning a ready-to-fire nuke into a one-way ticket to disaster. Basically, Russia would be lighting a fuse under themselves and then dropping a rock on their own foot. Meanwhile, during the war, Ukraine's network and power infrastructure got totally trashed, but the Starlink system came to the rescue, giving both the military and civilians a somewhat stable way to stay connected. Even when the internet and power went down, they could still chat via satellite, which really cranked up their communication and coordination on the battlefield. Then there was this one time, on April 3, 2024, in the Kharkiv region. Right after taking off, a Russian Su-35 fighter got shot down, and last year, the Ukrainian military's report said they downed over 40 Russian jets in just 1 year. That's no small feat. Even if the number might be a bit off, it sure made Russia think twice about flying their planes. The British Ministry of Defense even noted back in January 2024 that Russia's Su-57s had barely seen the sky since the conflict started. And they're not exactly eager to let other planes fly either. I mean, if Russia actually had air superiority, would the war look this messed up? Now here's the thing. Even though Russia's packed with military hardware and likes to brag about being the world's second strongest military, the war has shown that its weapons are way behind what the US and NATO have. Take September 2024, for example. A Russian Su-30SM fighter got taken down over the Black Sea by an F-16. That Su-30SM only started being used in 2013, and then between October and November 2024, Ukrainian F-16s shot down Russian Su-34 fighters twice. The Su-34s have been around since December 2006, while the F-16s are from the 70s. But clearly, they're still giving Russia a run for their money. Let's circle back to nukes for a minute. Sure, nuclear weapons just sit there in their silos, but they need constant upkeep. For example, maintaining a single US Minuteman III silo costs about $1 million or $2 a year. Now, Russia's got over 6,000 nuclear warheads, and it costs them a staggering $60 billion each year just to keep them in working order. Not to mention all the extra cash for infrastructure, salaries, and fuel replacements. And we all know Russia's been getting hammered by Western sanctions, so their economy's in a pretty rough spot. It's no wonder they can only properly maintain a few dozen warheads a year, according to the Washington Post. Plus, maintaining the delivery systems is even more expensive. Seeing that massive gap over the 3 years of the war gave Putin a serious wake-up call, which eventually pushed him toward calling for a ceasefire. By December 2024, he even ditched his tough guy image, saying something like, "Politics is all about compromise." Yeah, you heard that right? He's ready to compromise now, using the excuse that this is just how politics works. He's even gone on record saying that the US and UK aren't his enemies, but his friends. Now, the fourth and final reason is the most fundamental one. Way back in 1960, the UN General Assembly passed a declaration banning the use of nuclear and thermonuclear weapons, saying that using them goes against the UN's principles, international law, and basic human decency. Basically, if any country uses these weapons, it's committing a crime against humanity and wiping out part of our shared culture. Remember the time when China and the Soviet Union clashed over Zhenbao Island? The Soviets even threatened a surgical nuclear strike on China's military targets, but the US stepped in using the UN Charter and put a stop to it. Then on July 7, 2017, the UN General Assembly passed the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, which clearly bans all that nuclear business. And in March 2023, the International Criminal Court even issued an arrest warrant for Putin, labeling him a war criminal. This basically sends the message: if Russia ever uses nukes, not only will the US, UK, and France come after them hard, but they'd also go after Putin for crimes against humanity, maybe even dragging his family into it. That's a scenario Putin just can't live with. Think about it. He can't even win a regular war, so why risk a nuclear one against a small country? Facing the whole NATO alliance, does he really think he's got a shot? Deep down, I'm sure Putin knows exactly what's at stake. He wouldn't risk his own life over this mess. He'd rather lose some territory or even sacrifice nearly 800,000 soldiers than put his own life or power on the line. That's just how these authoritarian types roll. They use neighboring countries as buffers and their own people as cannon fodder, because they know that once civilization finally catches up, the people will live a better life while the tyrants get what's coming to them. So yeah, that's why Russia keeps yammering about nukes but never actually pulls the trigger. Nuclear weapons are the deadliest tools out there, but when it comes down to it, they're pretty much the least practical. They're the ultimate deterrent, but almost useless if you actually try to use them. Some folks say that if Russia ever went nuclear, it'd spark World War III. But honestly, that just ain't gonna happen. World War I and II were fought between two big blocs. But now, who's really on Russia's side? It's not like they've got a whole team backing them. If any of their so-called allies, like Iran, Cuba, or whoever else decide to jump in, they'd get wiped out in seconds. And that's exactly why Russia keeps all that nuclear talk without ever actually doing anything about it.